Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody. Week 16, the second round of the fantasy football playoffs, and this is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 16 and the rest of the 2023 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, as far as I know, you had a pretty successful round one. You're moving on to round two. Big matchup in our home league. And yeah, we're on to week 16.
Yeah, I mean, I can't complain. I'm in 4 leagues, advanced in 3. Lost the 14-person one. Found out, minutes before game time, Tyreek Hill was out. Obviously switched him out. My opponent had, I think, the second or third best year of the game of the entire season. Tyreek Hill would have needed, I think a little over what Jalen Waddle put up to win me the game. So a little frustrating, but no guarantee with that. So we move on. We got week 2 of the fantasy playoffs now. And of course, if you're still here, you're still moving on. Hopefully that means you took some of our great advice on our Sunday shows.
Hopefully, yeah. I think we were pretty solid on Sunday. So I will keep trying to do that. So thank you guys for joining us live. If you're watching the replay, obviously we're live on a Tuesday at 6 o'clock. We are normally live on Tuesdays, depending on the time. I know we'll have a live show next week as well to get you ready for week 17, your fantasy championship. But the next time you hear from us after today is our Sunday morning live show, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Well, probably this Sunday. I'm assuming that's what we'll probably end up doing. Well, me and Nick will talk about it. It's Christmas Eve, big Christmas Eve games, but we will still be live in some capacity this Sunday. Follow our social media channels just to make sure you get the time correct, but we'll post about that. But every Sunday, the live show on our Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I will be honest with you, Nick. Our Instagram did not go live for this show. We apologize about that. Still kind of working out the kinks, but we are live normally on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, as we will be for the live show on Sunday to get you ready with all your questions for your fantasy championship game. With that said, you can also follow and listen to the show every single week. It's uploaded to all audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you're on YouTube, go to our channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell icon to get notifications every time we post a video or go live, and drop a like on this video or any video that you do watch in the future starring us. Follow us and interact with us on social media, PrimeTimeFFPod, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. So we're going to start things off with Waiver Wire for Week 16. And I don't know if you have the waiver wire list open, but my Chrome, why don't you take it for a moment because my Chrome is crashing, and this is very frustrating.
Sure. So we'll go position by position like we do every single week. We'll take a look at who's the top of the board, the matchups for that week, and me and Nick will give you who we think has the best opportunity this week. And I guess since it's the playoffs, you're really looking at the next 2 weeks. So this is all according to Fantasy Pros, the rankings. Full PPR scoring format, and typically rostered in less than 50% of fantasy football leagues. So to kick it off, the top of the list, we are looking at Jake Browning, number 1, coming off a very, very good game, very entertaining game, finishing as a QB 8 on the week with 20 fantasy points, and been looking like a stud so far. Tough matchup going up this week at Pittsburgh in a division rivalry. But Jake Browning's been very solid the last few weeks. To me, he is the number 1 quarterback that you should be adding at this point. If you need him, I don't think there's a lot of other great competition that you trust. The rest of the list, you're looking at Gardner Minshew, Joe Flacco, Derek Carr, Nick Mullins, Tommy DeVito. Those are really the guys that are owned in less than 50% of leagues that you could potentially pick up. We'll see where Nick lies on this. I'm definitely leaning on the Jake Browning side. Looking at the number 2, you have Gardner Minshew going to the Atlanta Falcons. That's a good matchup, but Atlanta's defense has kind of been on a heater. They're kind of holding a lot more teams to a lot less points than they typically have in the past. For me personally, I don't love the matchup. I think the Colts should win pretty handily, but in a low-scoring game. So I will not be taking Gardner Minshew. Next, we're looking at Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is going to Houston. Great opportunity there. We just watched Levis cook this team. If they are rolling with the rookie and CJ Stroud, I assume he's going to be back this week. You're going to be looking at him facing the toughest defense he's faced all year. Game script should be great for Cleveland. Joe Flacco has some opportunity, but I still don't think that he's anywhere near the caliber of Jake Browning or Gardner Minshew for your fantasy lineup.
Yeah, so I'm back. Sorry, guys. For whatever reason, occasionally once we start the show, my computer goes into shutdown mode. I don't know if it's my computer. It might be program, streaming, etc. But anyway, all right. So we're looking at being the quarterback this week. I am in that situation. My lone league that I'm left in, I had lost Justin Herbert. So I have Derek Carr going right now. He didn't get like a 20-point game this past week, and he'd be going up against the Rams. Not a great matchup, not a bad matchup either. I want to see if Olave plays. Nick has spoke about Jake Browning. I heard that he likes the Jake Browning matchup. Are you worried at all about that divisional matchup against the Steelers?
My main point was Jake Browning is the best of the available on our list. Don't love the division rivalry. That's usually never a great sign, but Pittsburgh's back end has definitely not been what they once were. So I'm more comfortable rolling out of Jake Browning than Nick mentioned Derek Carr. Personally, I don't think Derek Carr has looked good enough over the course of the year for me to trust him. And he's so dinged up where it feels like they're going to rob him with Taysom Hill on the goal line all the time. Jameis at any point could come into any of these games, I feel like. So
yeah,
does worry me in that regard.
I would prefer Gardner Minshew than against that Falcons defense. The Falcons defense hasn't proven anything to me. They were decent against your Jets, but that's the worst offense in the league at the moment. So
Sure.
I'm not going to trust the Falcons. So, by the way, we are actually now live on Instagram. It finally worked, so that's great. If you're joining us on Instagram, sorry for the late edition, but thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. All right, Nick. I will read off some waiver guys to you like we normally do. So let's go to running backs. Zamir White, you were all over him last week. He had 17 fantasy points. He might have, I don't know if he helped you reach the second round, but he might have helped some other users reach the second round. Tajay Spears back up for Derrick Henry, who looked horrendous. We'll talk about that. Roshan Johnson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's not much to pick from. I think it's kind of waiting and seeing if Josh Jacobs plays or not at this point.
Sure. I agree with that. If Jacobs is out, I mean, Zamir White's a home run smash play. Jacobs was close to a true game time decision, so I'm going to guess that he's coming back this week. If not, I mean, Zamir White put up 17 and a half in that matchup against the Chargers. Their schedule, their matchup this week would be up against they would be going to Kansas City.
Not the Chargers.
Not the Chargers.
Yeah, that's a tough
Vegas.
matchup.
That's a tough one with Chris Jones up there. If Isaiah Pacheco, who Andy Reid says is coming back this week, is there, I don't like these guys, but Clyde and Jerick McKinnon in full PPR formats have been very, very solid for the 2 weeks that he's been
Would
gone.
you want Clyde or would you just want McKinnon?
I would go McKinnon in the full PPR. I know Clyde got that crazy touchdown catch. That feels like a real outlier for the player that he is.
Okay. Moving on to wide receivers. Noah Brown for the Texans, Tyler Boyd for the Bengals, Curtis Samuel for the Commanders. For the Curtis Samuel's on this list every week. Mario Douglas for the Patriots, Knicks guy Joshua Palmer for the Chargers, and he had a pretty good game last week. So your thoughts on those names potentially? Any of them? I'll be honest, nobody's jumping out to me personally, and in my leagues, any of the top guys that we're talking about aren't even available.
Yeah, so Nick said it best. The guys we're naming probably not available for the competitive teams, but if they are, I do think Noah Brown is the one for me, and then it's Joshua Palmer. Noah Brown, we've seen the player that he's been all year as the wide receiver 2 or the wide receiver 1 at any given point. He's been very, very solid, and he's looked really good for the last few weeks when he's been out there. This past week played pretty good. And then for Josh Palmer, first game back from the injury with Easton Stick, put up the 78-yard touchdown, and you would have thought, all right, that's the one catch that made up his week. He still put up like a 25-point game, over 100 yards on 5 or 6 catches. Like Josh Palmer as the wide receiver one for this Chargers team, they're 14-point underdogs right now to Buffalo. This game script is calling for Josh Palmer to get. They are going to, as I have coined it, spam the square button. And for those of you that don't know, when you're playing Madden, that means you're just throwing the ball to your wide receiver one repeatedly. That's exactly what it's going to be for Josh Palmer again. I think that Josh Palmer has the upside to be your league winner for your fantasy playoffs.
Okay. All right, on to tight ends. Hunter Henry for the Patriots, Gerald Everett for the Chargers, Cade Otton for the Bucks, and Tucker Kraft for the Packers. I was kind of all over him, I think a week ago, and he ended up posting a 15-point performance with a touchdown. 10 points and 15 points in his last 2 matchups. Now has Carolina and Minnesota. I'm kind of taking your analyst take from you at first here, but I'm on the Tucker Kraft train if I was going to take anybody off this list.
All right, I don't think that's terrible. I would still lean on Hunter Henry. I've seen enough this year in high voltage moments. They look to him in the goal line. They look to him in the red zone. I believe he just dropped 20 this past week or pretty close to it. So he's coming off the hottest game. To me, as the highest upside. He's probably the best pass catcher, maybe the second best pass catcher for that New England team. So he checks just a couple more boxes, and then they're going to Denver, who at once for like a 4 or 5 week stretch this season was a scary defense. Doesn't appear to be anymore.
Yep. And speaking of defenses, our last position here, Packers defense against the Panthers, Houston defense against the Browns, the Denver Broncos defense against the Patriots, and the Bengals defense against the Steelers. Who do you like? My least favorite one here is actually the Houston defense, because I've seen what Flacco kind of do. I think the other 3 are very playable, but I personally don't want to touch the Houston defense. They were fine this week against Will Levis, and they were fine.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Green Bay is clearly a 1. I think the Colts are my number 2. Green Bay's been up and down, but Carolina just has zero life on that team. I don't expect them to be able to score much points, regardless of what defense was on the other side. They genuinely just do not have enough playmakers, or they don't have enough. I don't even want to say skilled enough positions. Like, there's nobody that's going to break away for a 60-yard touchdown, crack open the game. They don't have an explosive running back that's gonna, get into that secondary, hit that second gear and take off. Like, this Carolina offense is so stagnant, and I don't see a way where they're going to put up a 23-point game. And in most standard scoring defensive games, 23 points just puts you at 0 for your defense's points against. I don't see them as a team that's going to hit 400 yards, which is typically where you go into the negatives. So to me, Green Bay is clearly the safest. And the Colts, I believe, have been a top 5 defense across the entire year. They've been on fire, and Atlanta's defense has been really bad the last few weeks for the Colts. I know defense is the one thing where every league has their different scoring format. And one league where I have it, and it's like as close to the generic scoring as you can get. He's got 6 of 7 weeks over double-digit points. So the Colts have really been on stride, and a lot of that's been an easy schedule. But a big part of that is a very solid defense. So I'm going to roll out the Colts.
Sure. I would too if I was still in my playoffs. Just so that the listeners know, I'm in a league where I have formed back-to-back years of super teams, back-to-back number 1 seed, back-to-back most points in the league, and back-to-back first-round exits in a league that is 8 teams make the playoffs out of 12. This week I put up a whopping 160. The next one closest to me was 130, and my opponent put up 190. So I think I lost to the highest score of the entire season, which in a sense is like, well, it definitely was a loss. But it sucks knowing that I had, like, my team didn't crap the bed. Like, the one who crapped the bed for me was Travis Kelce, who we'll talk about. But yeah, I got McCaffrey and Terry McLaurin, and the McLaurin thing is ridiculous. Because he entered the day with 2 touchdowns on the season and dropped like 40 points against me, whatever the stupid number was. I deleted the Yahoo app. I was very, very angry. Very angry. All right. Moving on to our Week 15 recapping every single game and giving our biggest fantasy football takeaway at this point in the season. A lot of football takeaways compared to fantasy takeaways, but we always find a way to spin it. So first game here, Chargers at the Raiders. As far as injury news, I don't have updates. However, Keenan Allen had missed the game. Justin Herbert was obviously on IR with thumb surgery and won't play again. So Easton Stick started, and Josh Jacobs also missed the game, opening the door for Zamir White. So, Nick, I didn't watch this game because I checked my phone. I think I had to go walk the dog or something. And I came back in after work and after walking the dog, and I checked my phone, and it is 21-0 Vegas. And I'm like, I'm not watching this. I'm watching something else. I think I may have put it on the bottom TV just for, for S and giggles. But yeah, I mean, what is your fantasy? I mean, I guess your fantasy football takeaway is going to be with Joshua Palmer. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be Josh Palmer, first game back from injury from the IR, puts up 21 points, a 70-yard touchdown, made up the bulk of it. But he put together a very solid game altogether. It didn't really heat up to the second half. The one thing I will say is we have seen week after week and year after year in football, when a coach is fired, your team pipes up the following week and they just play a little bit better than they actually are. They are going to be playing Buffalo, and Buffalo is, to me, I've said it on this podcast for 4 weeks. I said if they get in the playoffs, they're winning the Super Bowl because they are just so good and have been so unlucky. I think that Buffalo is going to be up so big. The Chargers are going to keep having this game script and going to play a little bit better than they actually have been all year. I think Kellen Moore, I think he's a much better offensive coordinator than people give him credit for. If they were winning games, I'm sure he would have got a lot more credit than everybody else on that team. So to me, I do think that the Chargers are going to look a lot better in this week. And this past week, they still put up 21 points. Their defense was awful. 113 yards for Palmer. I could very easily see him piping back to a 8 to 10 target game for close to 100 yards. And the touchdown is like, if he's
Keenan Allen will be back, though.
That still doesn't worry me. In games where Keenan Allen played, where Mike Williams was out and Palmer was in, Palmer averages 15 points in his career. So he still was able to be efficient. I know that's with Justin Herbert, not Easton Stick, but the game script should still call for the offense to air the ball out.
Is this game in Buffalo? Not. I'm still calling a walloping, Nick. I've been all over the Bills just with you. You were probably a week or two ahead of me, but I've been on the Bills train as well. I think this has disaster written all over it. And my fantasy football takeaway is that if you have Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, James Cook, you have 2 of the 3. You're right onto your championship. Like, this is going to be an offensive explosion. This is going to be a mauling. The Bills are hot. The Chargers are not. Easton Stick is probably number 31 out of 32 in the league in terms of starters right now. Number 32 probably being whoever's suiting up for your Jets. It's going to. Well, the Panthers are pretty bad too. So are the Falcons. So I think between those 4.
I just knew I was going to get that reminder when you said 31.
Oh yes. Yeah. I mean, I can't let that one go. It's not really to crap on my boy Nick. It's to crap on the Jets fans who throughout the entirety of the season, and I did see them, were like, oh, we don't need another quarterback. Zach's going to be fine. Rodgers can come back. And after that first game, I was like, why would you not just sign a vet? So I do have to take little digs here and there, but yeah, my point being, Easton Stick is really bad. And I don't care who's on this offense. Like, the coaching is not going to be good enough. The offense is not going to be good enough. The line isn't there. The Bills going to have a field day. Von Miller might have like a 5-sack game. I think the Bills defense is very playable. So my fantasy takeaway, like Devontae Adams here, who has been a disappointment this season at 8 receptions, 101 yards and a touchdown. So my fantasy football takeaway is if you are facing the stack of Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen next week, good luck. I hope you have like McCaffrey and Brock Purdy to combat him. Because if you don't, like, legitimately, like, really, really good luck.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Minnesota Vikings at the Cincinnati Bengals. Alexander Madison was out with a ankle, hip, something like that. I forget the injury. It does not say it. It does not say it here on our little document. And Jamar Chase, when he's day-to-day with an AC joint in his right shoulder, I think he's going to be out a couple weeks. I think he's shut down for the season. I don't think they haven't announced it yet, but I think he's going to be shut down for the season, which is bad for Chase owners because Jake Browning was kind of getting it done. I mean, this gave me a 324, 2 tutties, and a pick. So very bad for Chase owners. What are your thoughts on this game, though? Because a lot of fantasy relevant stuff from a lot of these players.
The big takeaway is kind of and as I'm going to call him, the second best system quarterback in football, right behind Joe Burrow. For the last
Brock
3
Purdy.
weeks, I don't know if you put
Brock
Joe
Purdy.
Burrow on those 49ers. You think Joe Burrow wins the MVP? No questions
Yes.
asked. Okay, so
Yes.
then you think he's a better system quarterback. Anyway, Jake Browning, maybe number 3 behind Purdy. All right. Over the last 3 weeks, he is the QB2 since being announced the starter. And this offense has been loaded. They are loaded. Everybody is feasting on this team and hitting their fantasy projection, if not exceeding it. T. Higgins put up his best game in a very long time with 22. I've been on this for weeks. The Bengals are loaded. Do not have as much fear as you should in your Bengals players. If Jamar Chase misses time, I know Nick thinks that they're going to shut him down for the year. I think that they're going to try and push him out there because they still are in the playoffs. And with the struggles at the top of the bracket, if they go up against Baltimore, Cincinnati can beat Baltimore with this roster. They can beat Miami. They can beat Jacksonville or Houston or Indy. They can hang with any team in this league, probably outside of Kansas City or Buffalo without Burrow. So to me, I do think they're going to try and put Chase out there. I don't think it's this week. I think if you had him and you needed him for your playoff run, this might be the end of the road for you because I don't think he's going to be out there. But I think if you get to championship week, he's gonna find a way back out on that football field.
Okay, I had seen the report that he was going to miss a couple weeks, and that tells me if you're missing 2 weeks, you're just shut down for the season at that point.
Sure.
So Joe Mixon had another touchdown. Ty Chandler was pretty good, 132 yards on the ground with a tutty. Addison exploded, 111 yards, 2 tutties, and Justin Jefferson was just okay. I think you can still play your Vikings position receivers. They have the Lions twice, and I think the Packers. I think that they're scheduled, but they do have a fairly easy schedule for receivers, at least. Steelers at the Colts. The Steelers are bad at football, especially on the offensive side of things. So Kenny Pickett was out, and now they are going to start Mason Rudolph against the Bengals on Saturday. Zach Moss with a shoulder injury. He intends to play Sunday's game against the Falcons, despite being forced out of the game on Saturday. Michael Pittman also suffered a concussion. He left the game. Report here says that he was doing good and he'll be monitored throughout the week. So check that. Jonathan Taylor's feeling good and could be back in action for the Week 16 game. So again, it's stuff to watch, throughout the week. Aside from that, I can't speak English. Aside from that, Nick, any fantasy football takeaway? Our guy Josh Downs, 3 receptions for 19 yards, even with Pittman out after the first quarter.
We're gonna call him. You know how me and you have our my guys that we have for the year.
Is he our
I think
guy?
we're gonna call it the fans guy.
The fans guy.
So this way, anytime that someone in the comments says, "Oh, you missed on this pick," or "You missed on this guy," because we're human. No fantasy football show nails every single week. We're gonna pull up the Josh Down tapes because we're gonna say, "No, that was never our guy. That was always your guy that you asked us about." One fantasy football takeaway, and we mentioned it earlier: the Colts defense is really good. The Pittsburgh offense is not very good. Regardless of the matchup for the Pittsburgh offense, I don't want any piece of it. I really, outside of Deontay.
What about Deontay Johnson? I was going to say, I think he's had a couple weeks in a row now where he has good stat line. I'm trying to get the numbers here. I'm trying to find them on Fantasy Pros.
Outside of Deontay, I think I'd bench every single one of these Steelers. There is not one that I've trusted. That I think you can trust to go win you a fantasy championship. On the Colts side of the ball, their offense has totally proved this wrong. The running game has been explosive all year. That you put in Trey Sermon, who's on his 3rd NFL team. I remember me and Nick hyping him up back in our first season when he was drafted by the 49ers.
That was a Nick guy. That was not a me guy.
I still echo the case that Trey Sermon was a hit because Elijah Mitchell was a hit. It just happened that Trey Sermon got hurt. And then Elijah Mitchell came. Anyway, then he winded up with an Eagles stint, didn't work out, and now he's here and apparently can run the ball really well. The Colts offensive line is really good. The defense is really good. The one thing the Colts have always, I feel done well outside of that Andrew Luck 5-year period was control both lines, the defensive line and offensive line, and it always made fantasy relevant players. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, we saw 2 years ago, as the RB1. Michael Pittman for 3 years now has exceeded expectations. The quarterback play has been very solid from a backup in Gardner Minshew, and we thought we were getting Anthony Richardson for the duration of the year. So you know who to play on this team now, like comfortably. And I think next year it's going to be a real interesting discussion with Anthony Richardson behind the helm, like which of these guys are going where, because I don't think Michael Pittman's going to slip in drafts anymore. If Jonathan Taylor is going to be probably going back into the first, middle of the second, I think he still gets drafted there. I don't think you're going to see him dip like a lot of people expected him to.
I think he's like a 3rd-round pick next year just due to the fall down. But when he's on the field, he wasn't bad. Also, I just want to note here, Deontay Johnson last 3 weeks, 13, 14, and 16. Not crazy numbers, but if you're looking for a flex play and he's on your team, he's still very playable.
Sure.
Minshew also had 250 and 3 touchdowns. So again, that's why if he's on your waiver wire, that's who I would play if he's around.
Yeah.
Broncos at the Lions. This is a very important game for playoff standards. And it was a walloping. The Broncos, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers from it, and I did watch this game, but looking at the numbers here, I don't think anybody had like a really fantasy relevant game from the Denver side. Judy had 3 for 74. It's a 10-point game. Sutton had 5 for 71. That's a 12-point game. Russell Wilson had 220 yards, 1 passing, 1 rushing touchdown. I'm sure he had a decent number, I guess. But this was a Lions just walloping. Everybody but David Montgomery probably exceeded their their projection. And that's just because Montgomery had an 85 yards, which is a really solid game, but didn't have the touchdown, didn't catch any balls.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have a fantasy takeaway besides the fact that the Lions are just all playable everywhere. They have the Vikings twice in the playoff. They have the Vikings this week, and next week they have. I'll look.
For me, looking at the Broncos, I really think it's more of a long-term question of where does this team go, because we saw a very hot streak, and we've now watched multiple times this defense collapse against better offenses. I think that they're going to blow it up. I really do. I've been saying this for weeks to Nick. I think that Russell Wilson is not going to be a Bronco next year, and a lot of people are treating it as a hot take because he has a lot of touchdowns. It's one of the biggest outliers in the history of football. You know, we talk about Austin Eckler, who had 45 touchdowns over a 2-year span. The Broncos' running game has like 3 or 4 over the span of 15 weeks. Like, it is such a bizarre outlier in all of football. This offense is so awful. They're averaging less than 2 touchdowns a game, which just is not great enough in the National Football League. And you're looking at one of the highest payrolls on defense, one of the higher payrolls at quarterback for not good enough play. And I know Russ is getting in the end zone. I believe he's averaging right around 200 passing yards per game across the entire season. And the Detroit defense, they've got some good players. They are not a top defense that should be shutting down an elite or a top 10 or top 16 game managing quarterback. People want to say the Broncos don't have weapons. I think Cortland Sutton's very good. I think Jerry Jeudy, I think he's overrated, but he's been a very solid player. The running game all year has been efficient enough. So they're checking a lot of boxes outside of just not having a playmaking quarterback. Russell Wilson's a game manager to this point. And for your fantasy team, Sutton is the only one I think that's been consistent enough to throw out there for a pass catcher. And you've probably known this, so there's no reason to really echo it. But I really don't know how you trust these Denver Broncos moving forward. And they have one of the easier schedules for defenses remaining, but I still don't know if you can trust them to explode and go win you a game.
So the Cowboys have the Vikings this week. I'm sorry, the Lions have the Vikings this week, and then they play the Cowboys, which will be a very interesting game. Yeah. But my big takeaway is kind of for next season in the sense that there is going to be a big changing of the guard in tight end, and Sam Laporta is going to be in the mix next year. I think he'll be drafted maybe in like the TJ Hawkinson range where he was this year, like somewhere between third to fifth round. He'll be drafted somewhere in the top 5. I'm very interested though. I mean, this week 556 and 3 touchdowns. Like the yardage isn't crazy, but he's a big focal point of this offense. And I'm just intrigued to see kind of where that goes. Let's do it
right now. I mean, next year, would you rather have Travis Kelce or Sam Laporta? regardless of ADP.
I think I'd rather have Travis Kelce.
I think I'd go Laporta. I really do. I mean, they're 0.2 points away from each other. I know Travis Kelce missed the game in week 1, but his lows have been really low, and his highs have not been as high as you want from your one.
Well,
after the bye week,
Kelsey's one low is 4 in week 9. Laporta had Laporta since his bye week in week 9 has had 8, 6, 17, 29, 4, and 28. There are a lot of really high games from Laporta that are skewing his numbers. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but Kelce is still really consistent here.
No, the consistency is still there. The explosiveness is not there, and that's what you need.
Sure.
When you're taking a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round. You need someone that's going to go win you a week. And Travis Kelce has probably won you a week in week 7 and maybe 5 and 6 where he put up 22. But and I know my question was worded as who would you just rather have? Travis Kelce is not going to be going in the 1st round next year. He's got to be going at the back half of the 2nd, in my opinion. And even there, I wouldn't take him. I think
I don't think
mid-3rd, early 4th, I would rather have.
I don't think there's a tight end that I would want until round 3 or 4. Okay, so the highest scoring tight end at the moment is TJ Hawkinson at 209 points. If I was to go to wide receiver, Hawkinson would be the wide receiver 14 on the year. If I went to running back, Hawkinson would be the running back
8 or
9 on the year. My point being, the position is a little thin per se, but there are serviceable tight ends here that you could get without stretching out. So next year you could play with TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, probably George Kittle, maybe David Njoku. Then there's Trey McBride. There's Jake Ferguson. Mark Andrews is further down the list because he got hurt. Kyle Pitts, depending on who's quarterback. Like there's names. Taysom Hill. I mean, there's names there, and this is without even tight ends getting drafted this year. So my point here being, yes, Travis Kelce. In my opinion, I wouldn't take Kelce until round 3, and even then, I'd have to look at the board and say, do I think this player will score more? That's where I'm kind of looking at the moment, because Kelce, I don't want to get too much into Kelce because I have thoughts on Kelce. So let's see.
That's
talk. As a Kelce drafter, I definitely have some thoughts. All right, Chicago Bears at Cleveland Browns. This was a Bears-Browns game. This is exactly what a Bears-Browns game would look like.
I don't know if I would expect a Bears-Browns game to feature Joe Flacco to throw for nearly 400 yards.
400 yards.
Yeah. I know what you mean. It felt like a Bears-Browns game.
Yeah. All right. Your big fantasy football takeaway.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. I don't have one. I feel like all your guys. You know who to have. I think Joe Flacco played a fluky, very good game against. And I think the Bears defense has been very good since that Montez Sweat trade. Played a very good last quarter and racked up some yards. I don't think you learned anything about any of these fantasy players.
Yep, that's okay. I'll accept that, and that's okay. My only thing is that Jerome Ford, I think, really disappointed us. I think me and you expected a better performance out of Jerome Ford. It's a reminder that he's not Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt of a couple of years ago, and that's okay.
Correct.
Bucks at Packers. We had some injuries in this one. Christian Watson was out. I think it was a hamstring. AJ Dillon was out. I think it was a thumb. Luke Musgrave had a kidney injury. It was a part of the Packers injury rehab group on Thursday. I don't know what that means. This was a walloping, and I've been saying it for weeks. The Packers stink. Jordan Love stinks. They all stink. They aren't that good, and I've been saying it for weeks. This was not going to be a team in the playoffs that was going to make some noise or beat anybody. They just were never that good, and I'll stick to that point. We were kind of high on Jaden Reed on our Sunday show. He had 6 for 52 and a touchdown. So he had a pretty serviceable game. Tucker Kraft was also kind of high on. But then you see the target leader, or maybe the target leader was actually Jaden Reed. The reception, the yard leader was actually Dontavion Wicks, 6 for 97, no tutties. Aaron Jones returned and did not have a good game. Another bust on the season. I'll let you speak now, Nick, because some very interesting numbers in this game. But the Bucks definitely outperformed that. I think the Bucks are going to be playoff bound. I think they're winning that division personally. I think that's what's best for the NFL. So I think the Bucks actually might be able to compete with some of these NFC teams that are not named the 49ers.
I agree with that. I think the only thing that would be really interesting is if the team that I called a fluke for the last 6 weeks met them in the first round, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, we'll talk about them. Save your thoughts. We'll get to it.
And even if not them in the first round, they're going to go see the Dallas Cowboys. So they're going to go see one of two teams that a lot of people think are flukes. I think Tampa Bay's offense is very good. I think that they played a fluke week. I think that Green Bay defense is not great. I think Rachaad White is not a fantastic running back, and he's been playing like a top 3 running back over the last 8 weeks. So good for him. But I don't think he's that guy. Baker Mayfield had the first perfect passer rating game by QB going into Lambeau ever. 381 yards. I think he had 3 touchdowns. Phenomenal game by Baker.
Passer rating of 158.3. I think that's a perfect passer rating.
That's exactly what I just said. So Baker played by far the best game of Baker's career, and it came against the Packers defense, which is not great. Nick, you wanted to dig on me on Jordan Love? Fine, let's talk about it. He finished as the QB. Let's see. Let's pull it up
10.
real quick. I think a little bit lower, but he finished with 17.5 fantasy points. QB 16.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
He finished 0.2 behind Patrick Mahomes. He finished 1 point above Josh Allen. Baker Mayfield, of course, had the QB2 performance on the week behind Jared Goff. The only question I really think that exists is Baker Mayfield a must start regardless of matchup the rest of your playoffs. First, they're going to be hosting Jacksonville, and Jacksonville's defense has not been great. And then they are going to, on New Year's Eve,
the Saints, I think.
They are going to be hosting this. Yeah, that's right, the Saints, because of the.
He's not a must start. I think it depends on who you got. I would have started him in my dynasty if I was still in it because I had lost Joe Burrow. So he might be a must start depending on your league.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah. My only other note here is that Chris Godwin, who has been a bust this season, I think, 10 receptions for 155 yards. He did show up in your playoffs, which is good. From Nick B on Instagram, defense question for this week: Philly, Cleveland, the Jets, Commanders, Green Bay, or Denver? Who do your Jets have?
Commanders. They play each other.
If Stroud is not playing, play Cleveland. If he is, I'd go Green Bay.
I would go Jets and then Carolina. I think the Jets, they got blown out by a very good Miami Dolphins team. If you want to win a fantasy championship, you need your defense to force turnovers. And the fact of the matter is that the Washington Commanders are one of the worst teams in the turnover category. They're going to give the ball to the Jets multiple times this game. There's a very high upside for a touchdown. I believe the Jets are actually a 3-point favorite, and we don't even know who the quarterback is going to be on Sunday in this game. So Vegas is telling you all you need to know. They expect this defense to force turnovers. They're going to go get to Sam Howell. Eric Bieniemy does not scare me. That offense does not scare me. Sam Howell definitely does not scare me. So I know I'm a Jets fan, the resident Jets fan on the show, but I've seen enough from this defense all year where not showing up in 2 games against Dallas, or 3 games, Dallas, Buffalo the second time, and Miami the second time, that doesn't scare me.
Texans at the Titans. CJ Stroud was out with the concussion. Nico Collins out with the calf. Will Levis left the game with an ankle injury, so he might not be playing. Nick, I know what your takeaway is. This should be everybody's takeaway.
I don't want to talk about it.
You got to talk about it.
I have to talk about it, but I don't.
Why did you draft Derrick Henry in a couple leagues? And I wanted Derrick, and I wanted Derrick Henry. So this is not like me dunking on you because I would have made the same thing if Derrick Henry fell to me, but he didn't fall to me in any leagues.
Derrick Henry was supposed to play the Houston Texans twice in the fantasy playoffs. You want to know who he faced this week? He faced the San Francisco 49ers front seven with D'Amico Ryans head coach. Statistically, for a running back, this was technically the worst running back game ever on the ground. by someone that got over 20 touches in a game. It was absolutely awful. Awful. And after the game, he said he does not know if his career is going to finish in Tennessee. I think he doesn't think that next season will be in Tennessee. I don't know if I believe his career is over, personally.
How is he still the running back 10 on the season? Like,
because
that's
he
nuts
just
to me.
punches the ball into the end zone.
I
That's
guess
all.
so.
You can see the inefficiency in his game if you take a like. I'm gonna pull up the whole season for him. I mean, the last few weeks, 5 awful this week, 18, 25, 20 fantastic. Average 2 touchdowns a game in that span. Before that, 5, 3 womp. 2 games prior to that, touchdown in each. Like, it is a mirage of just punching the ball in. It's kind of like what Mostert is having this year, where he's just getting touchdowns. But Mostert's got a couple more explosive plays and efficient running in this span. So,
Yep.
But to me, Derrick Henry is done. He's a 3rd down running back at best for a contending team. Like, I could see the Chiefs bringing him in next year and saying, Isaiah Pacheco, you are running the ball on 1st, 2nd, and you're the pass catcher. 4th and 1, tush push or hand it to Henry. That's it. That's the only purpose Henry can serve now.
This is next year's Dalvin Cook / Ezekiel Elliott. And we talked about changing of the guard with receivers. I mean, with tight ends. Our running back era is over. Zeke, Saquon, Henry, Dalvin Cook, Kamara, like, over.
Mixon, all those guys. Jones.
Yeah. Noah Brown also had 8 for 82 and a touchdown. So I just want to know that. And Devin Singletary is officially the running back 1. 26 carries compared to everybody else who got 121 yards. No touchdowns, but still. Alrighty, Nick, your Jets at the Dolphins. Zach Wilson, I think, had a concussion. I think he cleared protocol already. Tyreek Hill was shockingly inactive with an ankle injury. Yeah. No Tyreek, no problem. Nick, your fantasy football takeaway. By the way, we also have a hard out at 7:15. So just want you guys know that.
I did say that I think Tua is going to go lose people their fantasy championship. I don't know if he lost it for you, but finishing as the QB 23 on the week definitely does not help you win a fantasy championship. The Dolphins look great. They look just as explosive with and without Tyreek Hill. I think it hurt his MVP odds significantly not being out there. He needed the 2,000 yards probably to have a shot at winning it. Seeing them put up 30 against what has been a top 5 defense all year long, and it was mostly because of poor quarterback play. I think the Jets only had 5 yards going into the second half. It really shows you, like, this Miami team is much better than people think. And I think something that was really overlooked as we got a little bit later on into the season is Vic Fangio was a phenomenal coach for Denver, probably the best coach that they had in between the Peyton Manning and Sean Payton era. He's kind of reforming that defense now. And I know the Jets offense isn't great, but he put on an absolute masterclass and shut down the Jets. Not to say that the Jets are not shut down able, but DeMeco Ryans, who shut down the Titans last week or this week, 1 week ago, got blown out by the Jets. So there's a combination of things and some things that don't add up across football. But I think the one thing you can say is that the Dolphins defense and that team is maybe a little bit more of a contender than pretender than we're giving them credit for.
All right. Also, Waddle had an awesome game, 8 for 142 and a touchdown. Our next game, Chiefs at the Patriots. Isaiah Pacheco was out again, but he's expected to play Monday against the Raiders, barring any setback. Juju was out. Did he not play? I'm seeing an out here. And Ramondre Stevenson obviously was also out. What was your big fantasy takeaway from this one? I know mine. I mean, what was yours?
I mean, I don't know. I assume it's the same. Or if you want to talk to Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce stinks. Travis Kelce stinks. Travis Kelce stinks. I don't know if it's a Taylor Swift thing and he just like moved on. Like he stinks. He stinks. I drafted Kelce in 2 out of my 4 leagues. 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5. And I drafted him over McCaffrey in one of them in our league. And yeah, like I know the Patriots have had a tough defense. Bill Belichick probably went in there like, I'm going to shut him down. But like 5 for 29, like Kelce's not having the same season that he normally does. The gap between Kelce and tight end 2 is usually here. and he's not even tight
Well,
end
here's
one.
the gap
His gap
between
2 and 3 is here.
Well, actually, here's the gap between Travis Kelce and tight end 2 because he's not even the one on the season, which people drafted him in the 4, 5, 6 slot to be. So
or 2 drafted as a top 3 pick this season in most leagues. Maybe top 4. I mean, McCaffrey was there too. He was a top 4 picks in probably 90% of fantasy leagues.
Yeah.
My other takeaway was Rashee Rice was again awesome, 9 for 91 and a touchdown. He could start in your lineup every single week.
For sure, he's going to be a rookie that finishes with 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, no doubt this year. I think he's going to be. I don't know if I'm going to say the future of the Kansas City receiving core, but he is definitely the only guy that you could touch in your lineup. My takeaway is Ezekiel Elliott. Nick and I tried to warn you that it was lightning in a bottle last week. This week, 11 carries, 25 yards, less than 3 yards to carry. Absolutely horrendous. If you were in a PPR format, he saved you by getting close to 10, but not 10 points because he had 5 catches for 20 yards. That's about it. I mean, we don't really need to harp on the awful Patriots for much longer.
Giants at the Saints. Chris Olave was out with an ankle injury, should return this week. Nick, I don't know if we have to talk about this much. My only takeaway is that the Giants are still the Giants, and you could play most defenses against them. The Tommy DeVito show was fun for like a week against the Packers, who again are not that good. But yeah, you could play defenses against them. Derek Carr was fine. Kamara was fine. Nothing crazy. That's what I got.
I think this is the sticking point for both these teams. The offenses are not good for either. No skill position in this game got over 70 all-purpose yards, or 70 yards in their respective categories. So no one had 70 rushing yards. No one had 70 receiving yards. The skill position players in this game are not very good outside of Alvin Kamara. Saquon, I know people love. Saquon was horrendously overdrafted, and I still to this day do not know why. Nick and I think we're screaming, why is he going as the third running back off the board? He was going in the first round. I know people forget this because it was so long ago. It was him, AJ Brown, and CeeDee Lamb being debated for who goes 8, 9, 10. Like, it was such a horrendous draft pick, and he's shown no signs of being that player. He has got to get out of that team, and I think he's on the tag, or maybe he signed a 1-year deal. I forget what his contract situation is.
I think he has a 1-year deal.
So he has the potential to go leave this year, and I think he's got to. And I don't want to put it all on him because I think Barkley's a great dude. I don't have a problem with the player. I have a problem with the organization. And for them having an offensive coach and to have a superstar running back that they do not just pound the rock to, hand it to him on the ground, pass it to him. Like, what Alvin Kamara is doing for New Orleans is exactly what Saquon Barkley should be doing for the Giants, because that is your offense. And at least New Orleans has an excuse that they have a great pass catcher in Chris Olave. The Giants have no excuse. They have no weapon on the outside. Darren Waller was their only shot, and he got hurt halfway through the year.
And he's old, and he's yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Falcons at the Panthers. They both stink. Bijan Robinson finished with 0.4 points, I think.
Yep.
I can't even find Drake London on the stat sheet. They went 2 for 24. Adam Thielen was 4 for 43. This game was not friendly for any fantasy player. I'm looking with my eyes, trying to find one player that maybe scored over 10 points.
It might be the kicker for Carolina. That might be the only one.
I don't know. I think he had 3 field goals.
Yeah, so if
I don't know how long they were.
If one was 40, he got his double digits, but that's it.
My only takeaway is that Arthur Smith can't be trusted, and Nick was kind of right about Bijan Robinson a couple weeks ago.
Kind of.
He did nail it. The Falcons need a quarterback. The Panthers are bad everywhere, like we've been saying. Yeah, that's all. We can move on to other takes unless if you want to crap on Bijan for a second, like you could do that. I'll give you.
No, that's okay. I mean, I'll keep it short and sweet. I can't wait to see what they do at quarterback next year. There are some good guys on the market, Kirk Cousins and Justin Fields, to be specific. Either of those two guys go to this team, they're winning that division.
Or trade up and get Caleb Williams. Their draft pick's not going to be, it'll be 12, but like they could trade up. Next game, the Commanders at the Rams. This game was fantasy friendly. Not friendly for my team. I got wrecked. But what is your big takeaway from this one, fantasy wise? Also, injury wise, I'm sorry. Brian Robinson was out, and he's been a top 10 running back fantasy wise on the season. So big out there.
My only real takeaway would be Kyron Williams, Todd Gurley. Listen,
Maybe.
there was one stunt in this Rams running back offense, and that was Cam Akers, who was coming off a major leg injury and a second.
And they loved him before the injury.
Correct. So whatever the running situation is for this team, whatever the waiver wire play is, and this is going to be my advice to myself for next year if Kyron misses any time, take whoever that running back is and play him and don't question it, because Sean McVay knows how to coach. He knows how to scheme a running game. He knows how to scheme an offense. And I don't want to get into my bold take, but when Matthew Stafford and the Rams go walking into Detroit in the playoffs, I feel so bad for those Lions fans that rooted so hard for Stafford when he goes and takes the soul out of that city.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the take.
Terry McLaurin, 6 for 141. The tutty did me in. Curtis Samuel also seems to be productive. He had 5 for 41 and 2 tutties. San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. Marquise Brown was questionable with a heel injury. I don't think
he got hurt during the game and scored a goose egg. Cool. No takeaways. Just like you play your 49ers, they're awesome as always. McCaffrey was great. Your other players were not great. Debo had 2 tutties. He was pretty good. Ayuk was Ayuk had a fine day, but not like explosive.
He had 3 for 37.
The real story of the day is Trey McBride, who I want to just do this for a quick fun. Since week 8, when Zach Ertz got hurt, he is the tight end 2 in that span. He's averaging the most points at the tight end position in that span of the bye week. So Trey McBride, for those of you who are going to be looking next year for a tight end, or some people debate whether they play him at tight end. Him and David Njoku are the 1 and 2 over that span. I think you might have thought Laporta or Hawk. Those are 3 and 4. Those 2 guys, keep your eye out on them for next year, because regardless of the quarterback play, they have been very consistent for a very long stretch of the season. And they're going to be the guys that go somewhere between the tight end 6 and 10 next year. And they're going to be must drafts on our boards and must starts. And they're going to be everybody's hot tight end to take to be solid for your year.
Alrighty, guys, we've got about 7 minutes left. We do have a hard out 7:15. 3 more games to get through. Cowboys at the Bills. 31-10 Bills. Not a super offensive game. CD had about 12 points. Ferguson had 10. The lone player that really went out there and performed was James Cook.
Yeah.
And credit to the Bills for riding him. 25 carries, 179 yards, rushing touchdown, 2 receptions, 42 yards, and a receiving touchdown. So credit to Joe Brady and McDermott for riding the running game that was working.
No, I totally agree. And I don't want to get too much into it because we do have the hard out. So I'm going to tell you, come back for Sunday show when we have more time to talk about it. But these are 2 teams that have 2 very different trajectories that have been treated the same way by all of sports media, whether it be they're hot, they're cold, this week they can be in the Super Bowl, next week they're a fraud. Like, they both got the highs, they both got the lows. I think you kind of saw which one of these 2 teams is a real contender and which one might fall more in the pretender category.
Yeah. Sunday Night Football, Ravens at the Jags. Keaton Mitchell suffered a torn ACL. He's out for the season. Zay Jones was questionable, but I think he was okay. Trevor was questionable, and he was okay. Ravens won 23-7. Some bad bounces for the Jags in this one, but fantasy-wise, none of your Jags really did it in this game. I feel like every Jaguar kind of underperformed. And even for the Ravens, looking at them, I mean, it might just be Lamar, but looks like the rest of these guys. And I did watch this game, and it didn't look like a fantasy-friendly game. But, the numbers are not great in this game. This is not a fantasy-friendly game.
No, not at all. We don't need to get into it too much. I think we know Jacksonville really is not a great football team. And they're now tied, I believe, with the Texans and the Colts. I think that they're not winning that division. I think they're a wild card team at best. I think if they lose one more, and they're out of the division contention, they have a lot of tiebreakers that they're going to lose against some of those other contenders.
I think so. Yeah.
So it could be a very brutal awakening for Trevor Lawrence and those Jacksonville Jaguars.
And final game, Monday Night Football. My Seahawks trotting out Drew Lock against Jalen Hurts in his flu game, and they won. And I was very, very happy last night. I don't remember the last time I cheered so hard at the end of a Seahawks game. Very thrilled. Listen, we're back in it, and that's great. From a fantasy football takeaway, though, I'll let you go first. And now before you talk about, first off, my first question to you is, how injured / sick you think Jalen Hurts was? Scale of 1 to 10. Just give me a number.
I don't know. I don't think. Listen, to me, he wasn't 100%.
That decision at the end was absurd. Like why are you tossing the ball that deep when you have 2 timeouts? Like, I don't know. Decision making was off. But I'll let you speak now.
Again, something I'm going to say. We can save it for Monday. And I'll keep it short because it's more of a football take. But the Eagles are pretenders. They have the worst secondary in football. And the Seahawks wide receiving core is great. But over now 3 or 4 weeks, I don't know if it's fatigue, which it probably is because they faced, Seattle, physical team, Dallas,
San Francisco,
Buffalo,
Dallas,
San Fran, Kansas City. I'm pretty sure that was their 5-week stretch.
I think it is, yeah.
They are beat the hell up. They're going to be the way the records can work out right now. If Dallas loses to one of their games and the Eagles lose any of the next 3 games, because of the way the tiebreakers work, Dallas wins the division, which is weird because if they both win out, the Eagles win the division.
They both went out depending on what their opponents do. It's very wonky. I saw it on Twitter. We don't need to get into it. Basically, if they both went out, the Eagles have a better chance of winning the division, but even winning out's not enough. It's like a whatever it is.
Yeah, like it falls on where do other teams that they're facing fall. So,
right. Go on Twitter and just look it up. Like, we're not going to get into that.
The whole point is the Eagles, who everybody thought were the be-all, end-all, their personnel in the secondary is not good. They're going to go up against the Giants, who I'm not saying play Tommy DeVito. I'm not saying play any wide receiver there, but it is the most susceptible secondary in football. And championship week, highlight it now, circle it on your calendars. Trey McBride and Marquise Brown, if he gets out there, are going to absolutely go nuclear with Kyler Murray on the secondary. And I think that is where they could lose the division with Kyler Murray going up against them. And Kyler could save his job.
I think the Eagles will win out. However, I saw some takes on Twitter. It seems like they're playing like the same 4 plays on offense. And the former OC, I believe, is now the Colts head coach.
Yep.
And I think that's really showing later on in the season now. And that's just how it is. Your Seahawks did, or my Seahawks, I guess, did okay fantasy wise. I mean, Kenneth Walker had 86 yards and a touchdown. He might be the only guy that really performed, though. DK had 12 points. JSN had, looks like 15. I guess he outperformed.
Made his week.
Drew Lock didn't perform fantasy-wise. This was not a fantasy-friendly game by any means for the Seahawks or the Eagles.
Yeah.
But alrighty, guys. So that is our show. Going to quickly do plugs. The next time you hear from us will be Sunday. I think we'll probably do 9 o'clock. Me and Nick will talk about it. 9 a.m. in the morning. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Get you ready for your Christmas Eve / Christmas fantasy week. Hopefully we help you get some, a fantasy win on Christmas and you could advance to your championship game. So that'll be 9 a.m. on Sunday. Keep following us on our social media, PrimeTimeFFPod, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. It's Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for talking. Thank you for your questions, and we'll talk to you guys very soon.